morning, Uncle Dries. Thank you for visiting us after the big storm last night. It was terrifying, but we're all here live, and I'm so happy to introduce that we're going to do hammer care today, and over to you.
Thanks, Randy. Yeah, talking about the storm, we can be glad we are. But anyhow, today, last time we looked at the drill bit. Today, more specifically about the drill hammer, the DTH hammer. Now, as we all know, the bit and the hammer makes one unit. The one can't do much without the other one, or actually nothing without the other one. And the DTH hammer is a very sophisticated piece of equipment. It's manufactured, the world-class tools is manufactured at very, very tight tolerances. And we need to know that, we need to respect that. Nothing except air and water goes into that hammer. If we look at the tolerances, the tolerance between the piston and the inner sleeve, the maximum tolerance is 0.2. Sorry. Now, 0.2, if I measure one of my moustaches here, it measures 0.06. So it's a 1 and almost a half of the thickness of one of my hair.
That's
is the
amazing.
Tolerance between the piston and the sleeve. So imagine dirt getting in there, and imagine not lubricating it. It's very, very tight. The whole hammer right through, and it doesn't exist out of a piston and the hammer. It's a very sophisticated piece of equipment. I don't have the drawing in front of me, but if I look quickly, we've got the backhead inside, we've got the check valve with its spring, we've got the buffer rubber, then we've got the air distributor, the inner sleeve and the piston, the outer sleeve, the bit guide bush, and then the chuck nut, half moons and the chuck nut. Now, if we look at all of that, it's almost what we've got in a motor car's engine. I keep referring back to a motor car. But each and every one of us drives a motor car, almost each and every one of us. And a motor car, you take it for its services. If there's something wrong, you attend to it. If you don't know, you ask questions. You take it to a qualified person. And you ask, check, look what's wrong. Now we need to get it into ourselves to do the same with the drill hammer. Because the tolerances there are the same as in a motor car's engine. I can say I'm dealing in tires. One motor car gets 20,000 kilometers on a set of tires. The other one, same motor car, gets 80,000, 60,000 on the same set of tires. Now somebody can say to me, or the person that gets only 20 can come and ask, but why? This is not of good quality. Why does the other one get 60, 80? Why? There must be a difference. Something must be the cause of it. Maybe the one is driving gravel road only and the other one only on the tar road. Maybe the one tries to do off-road and he only gets 10,000 on his set of tires. Now here it's exactly the same. I can get a person taking a new hammer that only gets 4,000 meters out of a hammer, and you get another one that gets us 18,000-20,000. It's because of the treatment of the hammer, the maintenance, and as it says here, the operation practices and maintenance of the hammer. The air entering the hammer must be as cool as possible, as clean as possible. And here we get, if you get dirt into the hammer and you open a drill hammer, you can exactly see if the hammer was lubricated. The blue seize marks won't appear on the piston, but you get vertical scratches, clear scratches on the piston. That's when dirt enters the hammer. If it didn't get enough lubrication, the blue seize marks will appear on the piston and the inner sleeve. And when it heats up, the friction again, same as with the bit, friction inside. Talking about friction, the hammer's piston moves about 1,800 times up and down in a minute. About 30 times per second. Now the weight of that piston is, normal KL60 is about 23 kg, 24, 22. Depends what make of hammer you've got. Now with that travel of 1,800 times a minute up and down, the length of the spline, what friction will it cause in the hammer? And if that's not lubricated with that tight tolerance, it will seize. No doubt if you drive a motor car without oil, it will seize just around the corner. So it must be very clean, very well lubricated. If I change air pipes from the compressor to the hammer, make sure the air pipes are clean. If you start using a new set of rods, blow them out, clean them out before. I've had hammers that you can see the steel inside the new rods went into the hammer. For a start, it damages the check valve. The check valve is there if you close your air to keep the air inside the hammer so it can't escape. You've got pressure inside the hole with the water, so if you close your air supply, the air is going to escape through the hammer because the weight of the water pushes down the depth of the hole. So to prevent the water from getting back into the hammer, the water stays inside. And if your check valve is damaged and doesn't seal properly on top, the hammer sucks mud, stops hitting, breakdown. You've got to remove all the tools, clean the hammer again. The temperature of the air going into the hammer just as important. Compressor cleaners, oil cleaners, air cleaners should be clean. If you get hot air into a hammer, the buffer rubber on top, that's a rubber, and at the bottom of the hammer, the foot valve, the blower tube as we know it, is most affected by the heat. So if only the check valve is damaged, your heat generates at the bottom of the hammer, then you have a look there. But if the buffer rubber on top is damaged too, that's where the air comes in. The foot valve is where it goes out. Then you get both damaged. Normally, even if a hammer seizes, if a piston seizes inside the sleeve, the buffer rubber on top is not damaged. The heat doesn't affect that. Not normally. 99%. But if it's both, look at your cleaners, look at your oil coolers. Something may be wrong there. The temperature of the air entering the hammer might be too high. Rod changing, maintenance on rods. Keep your rods with the rod caps on both ends once you've taken it out. Close the rods, don't let the rod caps lie in the sand, and then put it on. If you clean rod threads, clean away from the hole inside the rod. The slightest piece of dirt can damage the hammer inside. Even when changing rods, if I bring a rod, tilt the head, the bottom rod is standing there in the hole. Before I connect, keep the cap, because the assistant brings the rod loader in. There's a lot of gravel and dust lying on that carousel. And when it stops against the stop, that falls inside the rod and it gets to the hammer. So keep your cap on. What I've always done is just move the top rod away. Then the assistant can take the cap off. So for in case if something happens and you lower the rod, his fingers are not get caught between the two rods. Just move it away. He takes the cap off, you move the rod in and you connect. That's on the connecting of a rod. There's most cases where we get the most and new rods dirt into the hammer. The previous time when we looked at the drill bits, there was something I didn't mention. Snake skin. Snake skin is a wear on a button that you get. It's microscopic cracks. And it looks like a snake skin if you look at it properly. The button may not be worn. It may not have a flat on if you drill in soft formations. But the norm is to sharpen the bit, even if it doesn't show any wear. Sharpen the button at about 300 meters to prevent that, because those microscopic cracks, they turn into big cracks. Then it breaks chips out of your button. That affects the other buttons. If a button is broken off, we all know that you can still manage with a bit, unless 3 is broken off next to each other. And 9 out of 10 times, that's what happens, because the one breaks off, breaks the second one, and it breaks the third one, until you realize there is a problem. You pull up and you see the buttons are broken. So if a button is chipped in half, grind it flat, so the other half doesn't break off and damage the rest of the buttons. So there's a lot of things to attend to. Another thing that in new rods is welding scale. The machining of the rods. You get the lathe shavings inside the rod. The manufacturers try and clean it, we try to clean it out, but there may be a piece sitting in the corner that gets through while you're drilling. Lubrication, very, very important. A normal QL60 hammer needs about 0.8 to 1 liter of the right lubrication. Right viscosity. You need to use, we can't use old engine oil. If you open a hammer that you've run on old engine oil, you can immediately see it. It's visible inside the hammer. You can see the seize marks, because it doesn't have the right viscosity. It's not the right lubrication. So rather than taking a shortcut, spend a little bit more, but get a little bit more out of your hammer. A hammer is a costly item. A hammer is a very costly item. That's why we should really pay attention to it. Protective cap we've mentioned. So always keep the hammer. If the hammer is stored, I've mentioned the lubrication at normal QL60, as I said, under normal drilling conditions, needs about 0.8 to 1 liters oil per hour. So watch your lubricator on the rig. Check it on a daily basis. If you drill, the air is open, the hammer works. How many hours per day did I run? Did I drill? How many liters of oils have I used? And it's easy to check. We've got a needle valve on the inline lubricator that's got a very, very, very fine setting. Now if you remove the drill string from the head before you start to drill, it's easiest to do it. Put a plank or something on the base plate of the rig. Open your air a few seconds, then the oil mark should appear on the plank. Then you know you get a continuous feed. Then when drilling, you can check how much the oil level dropped after an hour, after 2 hours, or after a day. But make sure your hammer gets a continuous lubrication. Continuous is very important. It depends on the formation. If we take 1 liter per hour, it's 250 ml per quarter hour. Sometimes if we drill into lava or some formation with a high quartz content, it takes you an hour to finish a rod. So if you only put 250 mils in when you start drilling that rod, and you drill an hour or more than an hour on the rod, you're only allowed 250 mils of lubricant through your hammer at one time. And 3/4 of an hour it ran without lubrication. So that's why the continuous feed is very, very, very important. Make sure the drums are clean on top before you fill up the lubricator. Ensure if you take the cap off, it's clean there. It's dirt, the needle valve can get blocked easily. But the easiest way is to check through your rod, through your drill head, if it blows oil out onto the plank. Then you know you're safe. As I say, right through, a hammer is like a motor car's engine. It's got various pieces of equipment, all very fine tolerances. So please, if you want the hammer to attend to us, we must attend to that. That's one of the main things we all know. If you've got to buy a new hammer, it's 4 or 5 times more costly than a bit. If I don't care for the bit, why would I care for the hammer? And the one affects the other one. Remember, the bit, as we said, I think we've mentioned it, travels as fast as the piston, because the piston strike phase strike the bit on top, and that heats the bit down. So the strike phase, that's another problem with dirt in the hammer. If I get dirt between the strike phase of the bit and the hammer piston, I don't have a straight travel. It heats the bit skew, the piston. I either chip the piston or I chip the bit. The only lubrication, we may have mentioned that as well, that the bit splines get. The bit moves up and down in the chuck nut splines the same amount of times, and the piston moves up and down. And if that doesn't get any lubrication, same, it's going to cease. It's going to overheat. You're going to damage your blower tube. You're going to damage your chuck nut. And one thing very important, there's a few things I think with the hammer we can maybe do another session. But if you grind bits, you've got to loosen your chuck nut, take the bit out of the hammer to be able to grind the buttons. Check for wear on the chuck nut. The bit has got, as we call it, nostrils. It's got air holes. And the air that escapes through that blows the chips, the shavings, on the same place all the time. They've got 2 or 3. As I said, as we call them, nostrils, air holes. On your chuck nut, that's the lowest in the hole, you get the most wear. So it's going to keep wearing the chuck nut on that same place. And that wear goes through onto the hammer sleeve. It eats through and your hammer sleeve cracks. Now a new hammer sleeve and a new piston is obviously going to cost you more than a new hammer with all spares inside. So the chuck nut should be turned 1 or 2 splines on the bit every time. Look at the wear on the chuck nut. Look at where your wear on the bit sits. Take a Koffie pen, mark it if you take it off. Mark the bit, mark the chuck nut, and make sure if you put it back, the part of the chuck nut that is least wear must always be in line with the air hole on the bit. If you replace it, the hammer sleeve, outer sleeve, replace the chuck nut. We don't want a smaller chuck nut than the sleeve because we're going to eat the sleeve away. So very important, check the chuck nuts, change them with a sleeve. And it's very wise to always use a chuck nut a little bit bigger than the hammer. So the shavings go past the hammer sleeve and doesn't wear the hammer sleeve. If a chuck nut is worn evenly, it's not to say I must throw it away. If it's not worn uneven, keep it. You may have a hammer that sleeve is worn thinner that you can use as chuck nut again. So keep it for in case. But as I say, very, very important, lubrication, cleanliness, because a hammer is a very, very, world-class hammer is a very sophisticated piece of equipment. So please bear that in mind. I think maybe on the hammer we're going to go another session because there's a lot to say. I think, well, I'll be busy all day long with the hammer. But I think until next time, Rundi.
Uncle Klets, you are so insightful. We are blessed to have you at Act Trading. Thank you so very much for all the information. I'm sure it's going to help so many people. Thank you.